Hello. So, as I said in my last couple of videos, I've been struggling with depression, and someone suggested that I listen to upbeat music. um, I'll be honest, I have not done that. Actually, when I'm depressed or feeling down, a lot of times I actually like to listen to depressing music because for some reason that makes me feel better. I don't know, I just feel like someone's commiserating, or like I feel some sort of camaraderie. I don't know why, but for some reason listening to depressing or dark music when I've been depressed has always sort of helped me. So I've been listening to a band called Typo Negative, and that's actually where I got the name Cinnamon Girl from, because I was one day I was trying to think of a name I could use for YouTube, and that song came on my shuffle. They did a Neil Young cover, so that's how I got my YouTube name. So that's an interesting bit of trivia. So I was online and seeing some of their music videos on YouTube, and somebody wrote in the comments about his whole his drug problem, and how his family they decided to do an intervention because of his drug issues, and then they sent him to they didn't just send him to rehab, they sent him to the psych ward, and then they threw him in jail, and then they sent him to rehab. So I mean, I know sometimes when there's an addiction problem and you're trying to get someone into rehab, sometimes they do end up in a psych ward for something like 48 hours, or they'll hold them for 72 hours at most, and then then you go to rehab or detox or whatever, because I've known that from people I knew who had addiction issues. But so I don't know how long he was in the mental institution for, and I actually remember hearing about this story when Peter Steele was still alive. He passed away actually in 2010, but this was when he was still alive, obviously. And there had been an interview on YouTube about how his family kind of intervened with his drug addiction, and how, I mean, obviously he had drug issues. Everybody knew it. They needed to do something about it. Obviously, it was out of hand, but he did say in the interview, and someone was actually writing about this in the comments, so remember when this happened and what his family did, and he was saying in the interview about how he felt taken advantage of. And an outsider watching this would be like, oh yeah, okay, right, buddy, you're a druggie, what do you want? But I really, thinking back now on that video, and just what I know about him as a person, and his music and things he said in the past, I have every reason to believe that this man was the scapegoat of his family. And, because he said, obviously he had drug problems, but he said that he felt like his family sort of took advantage of him, had him sent to jail, and just totally, kind of used the system to abuse him and have him labeled as crazy and all that, and sent him to prison. And he was saying that, I don't know why they're doing that, half his family is drug addicts, and I mean, that could be applied very loosely. I mean, drug addicts meaning, could be illegal drugs, they could be, or could be pot smokers, or alcohol and Xanax kind of people, I don't know what specifically is meant by that, but he comes from a family of all sisters, and he was the youngest, so that right there might give you some issues. But somebody was explaining how this whole thing went down. I remember vaguely, 10 years ago or so, because I followed that band since I was a kid. And then someone commented back, yeah, well, he did have a good relationship with his mother, people think, or a decent relationship with his mother, but the rest of them were vultures. So someone wrote that in the comments. And, I don't know, I don't think, I've seen interviews of him in the past. I don't think he had the best relationship with his father either. Father obviously had passed away a while ago. And the quote-unquote vultures they were talking about were his sisters and maybe a couple of cousins that were involved. Um, but yeah, I remember he had the drug issues and he said he felt his family kind of took advantage of him, and then there have been interviews in the past because he was known for his depression. I mean that's kind of like when you think of Peter Steele or Type O Negative, that's like the first thing that comes to mind, really. Um, and I I followed the band from a really young age because I remember seeing him on MTV. I think it was. I was like 9 or 10, back in the '90s, and I was just like, who is that guy? Like he was like the most gorgeous man I'd ever seen in my life. But not only that, he just seemed very intelligent, very deep. And I felt like I connected with him on some level. And I'm not just saying that from like a teeny bopper crush kind of perspective. I feel like he and I could have been friends or something. And I think now I realize that it's probably because he's a black sheep or a scapegoat or was. So there was the whole incident with his family sending him to jail over his drug issues and all that, and then he passed away in 2010, I think it was. And not that long after, his sisters came out with a family blog or a website, praising their brother Peter. And I thought it was odd. Well, no one had ever done that before, but I looked at the website and I was reading the stories. It had like all family photos and stuff like that, and people would come in, share their stories of how they met Peter or whatever, and talking about his upbringing and his family life. And I just remember like the way it was portrayed on this blog, and what he said in his interviews, and just his general persona in general. I'm thinking, I remember seeing this, I'm like, something doesn't add up here. I mean, something's not right. And this was before I even knew what narcissism was, or really knew too much about it. They're all talking about how he developed his talent, and how it was such a musical household and freedom of expression, and he was exposed to music and art, and that's what they were about, and it was such a nurturing environment. I'm like, wait a second. First of all, that's not what he said in his interviews, and like, why would he lie? And like, he never came out and said my family sucked or anything like that. He never said anything like that, but if you read between the lines, it was clear that he felt like a piece of shit. You know what I mean? Like, I guess I can see it because I sense it, because I know exactly what that is. And just for someone that was known for his depression, and if you're familiar with their music at all, or if you even just listen to a few songs, look at some of the lyrics, like, you don't just pull that out of your ass. You know what I mean? Like it's gotta come from somewhere, and I think part of the reason I felt like I connected with him mentally was because I think we've experienced a lot of the same things, and I think it comes from being a black sheep. So just if even just looking at some of their music and lyrics, and just kind of the depression behind it, and then people say like, well, maybe he had a chemical imbalance, and that could be, that definitely could be, but I feel like there's a lot more going on there, and to come out with just such, it's hard to explain, but like, you know it when if you're a scapegoat yourself or a black sheep, it's like, it when you see it. I know it probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but I think that's why I always felt like I connected with him and his music, and then to see this website, and like, make it look like, oh, our family is so great, and this is Peter at 10 years old, and we were so proud of him. He was like a son to us, because he was the youngest, of his family. And it just I just felt like it was a bit of a disconnect from what Peter himself, not only what he said, but his persona, and then what was portrayed on this website. And then a few years ago, they released a book, a biography about Peter, and there was a lot of drama that went into this book, apparently. And because I followed this band since I was a kid. I was kind of following what was happening with the book. I wanted to buy it when it came out, and I did. Coincidentally, it came out on my 30th birthday, so that's kind of interesting. So I was one of the first ones to buy the book. But the book almost didn't happen, and apparently it was because of a lot of drama between the women in his family and the author. How they were helping him out initially with stories and pictures, and then they pulled out last minute, and they all of a sudden decided they don't want to do it anymore, and it almost seemed like they were kind of sabotaging this guy. They're the author, and the book that was gonna the book almost didn't happen. And I've seen, I don't know his family personally, so I really can't say for myself, but I've seen comments on these websites and YouTube videos saying how these women are horrible, they were so jealous of their brother, and it really seems like that was the case. Like they were just jealous of his success, and someone else described them as vultures. I'm like, wow, I mean, I don't know them personally, so I can't really say, but I think there's enough evidence to think that this man, may he rest in peace, that this man was a clear scapegoat. And I think that was probably a factor in his depression and his substance abuse and ultimately his early death. He died in his late 40s. And he was sober at the time of his death, but he had heart damage from years of drug use, and kind of died that way. And a lot of times, depression and suffering, it really makes some of these people just absolutely brilliant musicians and brilliant artists, and I think it's what made him the artist that he was. But I just figured I'd do a video on it because I've kind of followed the band since I was a kid, and so I got glimpses of what his family might be like, or their drama, between him getting sent to jail and the book almost not happening, and then just the disconnect between the family website. It just, at the time I was like, oh, this is so nice what they're doing, but looking back, it's actually kind of bizarre. I don't know how many other musicians' families have done that. Someone even commented, who does that? What other musician has that? So I was like, oh, well, maybe he just got a really nice family. But now, knowing everything I know now, I'm kind of scratching my head. So, yeah, between that and the book and some of the comments from people who are maybe a little, obviously, closer to the situation than I am. I don't know these women personally, but it's probably better that I don't, actually, so... Yeah, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that band, if you know similar stories of other musicians, or I think people that rise to fame in general that come from narc families, I think this is very common. And obviously he wasn't an A-list celebrity or anything, so it wasn't really out there, but it definitely sounds like people describe a jealous pack of wolves were surrounding this man, and for that, I am sorry. May he rest in peace. And I'll see you on the next video.